Okay, and it looks like we are live on YouTube right now. Hi, this is Bob Boross, and this is my Jazz and Tap Dance Life. This is my YouTube channel for information on jazz and tap dance. I've been posting lots of things about technique and history in the past, but lately I've been working on live broadcasts where I've been interviewing people who are working within jazz dance, and the series is called Preserving the Jazz Dance Heritage. Today we are going to be speaking with Dollie Henry, who is a jazz dance choreographer and teacher and advocate in London and in the UK. So she's going to give us some information about what she's doing there in jazz, what her approach to jazz dance is, what's it like there in the UK, and just what she sees for the future. So I am going to bring her into the broadcast right now. And there she
Hey,
is. Hi,
hello.
Dollie.
Hi, everyone. How are you doing? Let me make sure I'm sitting in the shot. Oh, I need to go the other way.
There you go.
Hello from London, everyone.
Yes,
Hi,
hello.
Bob.
Yes, and it's really good to finally connect with you. I know we've like emailed on
Oh,
a
yes.
couple points in
Yes.
time over the years, but you're so busy and I'm doing things, and so we've never actually. So it took all of this for us
Well, what a
to sit
fantastic
down
way to
and
get
talk.
connected. And
Yeah.
technology is so wonderful that we can
Hmm.
actually reach each other in this way. So
Right.
thank you for inviting me, Bob, to
Oh, you're
chat
most
with you
welcome.
this evening, my evening,
Yeah.
your afternoon.
That's right, and thank you for spending the time. So you've been involved with jazz dance, I would imagine, for quite a long time, and we'll talk a little bit about what you're doing now. But of course, always the first question we sort of talk about is like, what's your history? How did you get involved with jazz dancing? Who are your teachers? Who are your influences? What kind of set the framework for where you
Framework.
are now?
Well, I started dancing when I was 4 years of age. And actually, before we even get to where I got to as a jazz, somebody who fell in love with jazz or jazz fell in love with me, I trained as a classical dancer and I was
Mm-hmm.
trained under the Royal Ballet. And I
Mm,
always
okay.
knew that I wanted to dance. That was something that was very prevalent in my life from a very early age. And I think I drove my parents upside down and round the bend because I was constantly on the move.
Hmm.
And we talk about how I got influenced by jazz. Really, I think that started in my family, from my father.
Hmm.
And, there's me doing at 4 years of age doing ballet, but my oral perception was all jazz. And the two did collide. It was easy for me to find a way to meld those two together, one being through the dance of ballet, but also how that also allowed me to feel music in a different way, and that being jazz music. So as I say, I'm 4 years of age, I'm going through my life. I get to the age of 12 and I realize,
Hmm.
oh, I still want to be a ballerina. In fact, my dream was to be the first British black ballerina, but I was told
Hmm.
along the way as a
Hmm.
black dancer that was not ever going to be a possibility, especially in the UK. That just wasn't something that would happen. And around the age of 13, I started doing what is known as competitions. And they were
Sure.
competitions like most
Hmm.
kids do, many kids do. And I was put into competitions, and there it was. I found my place on stage. And finally, I was somewhere where I felt I belonged. And actually,
Hmm.
what it allowed me to do was try out different styles of dance. And that is when I really got into the dance side of jazz. It was then
Right.
called modern. We called it
Jazz was
modern
called
then.
modern.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
even our exams were taken, they were called modern. They would have
Okay.
jazz elements, but it was called modern. So, if we look back in history, we know that jazz was under the umbrella of modern dance. So it was
Hmm.
seen in the UK, we had ISTD, which was the syllabus formula. So those were the exams that I took in modern. I
Mm.
then realized that jazz dance was something completely different, because by the time I got to Performing Arts College, which was Lane Theatre Arts, at the age of 16, I
Hmm.
auditioned to get into this Performing Arts College at 16. At 15, I got in. I had to wait a year. And I got to Performing Arts College at Lane Theatre Arts, and there was jazz, the word jazz, not modern. It was called jazz.
Right. Okay.
Most of the teachers that had taught me were British. And
Hmm.
then at 16, I found myself drawn to a gentleman who is actually American. His name is Charles Organs. He was over here with a musical, Bubbling Brown Sugar,
Oh,
and
sure.
he
Okay.
stayed in this country and he opened up a performing arts school. called the American School of Performing Arts in Drury Lane in London. So whilst I was training in the week with my ballet, my contemporary, my vocals, my acting, my modern and jazz, and all those other things that went with learning to be a performer, that was 5 days a week. On a Saturday and a Sunday, I would go to Charles Organ's Performing Arts School in London. And that was my first real connection to real jazz, what I perceived to be real jazz, to jazz music, the aesthetics, the way we moved our body, how I was shown to express myself. It was something completely different to where I'd come from and what I'd been taught over my years since the age of 4. And that kind of continued, and through the mentorship really of Charles, it opened up another avenue for me. I realized that actually, okay, I'm not going to be a ballerina because I'm not going to be able to be a ballerina because I'm told I'm not. Okay, here it is. This is where I'm going to go to.
That's your
So
direction.
that was my natural instinct, was to go to where I felt comfortable, where I could be me. I could express my physicalness and also what I hoped was artistry. Even at that young age, I was allowed to be artistic in a form that I had never seen in that way, or displayed in that way, or taught in that way. So I think that opened up my perception of what jazz was, which really allowed me to understand, even though I'd listened to the music from a very young age, the Americanism of what I wanted to know, I didn't find until I was 16.
I see. So did he have a personal approach to jazz, or was he teaching one of the so-called, more established jazz dance techniques? Was he a Luigi
Established
person?
jazz dance technique, but if I'm honest, Bob, it was the Black experience of it that for me really touched home, because finally there was somebody that I could look at and go, oh, that represents me. I can do this. I am allowed to do this. I can go that far.
And did he work in vernacular dance at all, or was he more just the modern jazz?
His background was also, I mean, I think he'd worked with Alvin in early days. I mean, he had his own dance company in the early days. He came over in a musical theatre form. We really knew him as a musical theatre director and choreographer, but it was much more than that, because his knowledge and his eye and his style was just so different from what we were all learning here in England at that time. So I was very lucky to be mentored underneath his tutelage, actually.
Do you know did he have other people that he influenced? Who have gone on to do
in the musical theatre world, and for us as Black dancers in the UK, this again was somebody that we could really look up to and go, okay, there's a possibility for us, because I think the difference that we have here in the UK back then, and I'm really talking back then, is that we needed figures that we could look at and see. I mean, there were very few Black teachers. There were very few Black practitioners that were teaching at that level, at that professional level. So you really had to go out of the performing arts system to be able to find it. And if you weren't smart enough to go and look for it, then you would stay in the system and not really get out of the system and venture further. So for me, that also took me to my musical theatre side of where I was going to go, because at that time, still there were no jazz companies. There was nothing like a jazz company. So the only place that you could go would be to musical theatre, which was great, and it was fabulous while it lasted, but it didn't always feed the soul for me as a jazz performer and a jazz artist, I suppose. But it was wonderful working in those situations. I've jumped a little bit, but I think that's where it took me. It took me from Charles Organs to allow me to know that, yes, this is an area that I can pursue as a performer, as a Black female performer. I can pursue jazz. Every show that I went into in the West End, I did 6 West Ends, possibly one after the other. I think probably one after the other, and worked my way up. And the last show that I finished doing was Sophisticated Ladies with Gillian Gregory. Sure. And that was amazing. That was an amazing show. It was something that I'd seen in America. And when it came to the UK, I was like, whoa, okay, it's happened. I'm going to be in a show that is about Duke Ellington. It's Duke Ellington's music. It's all jazz. And if I'm totally honest, not all of that jazz element and the physical stance of it and the physical expression of it was there, because it was so set for musical theatre, as in, here we go, here's a commodity.
Right.
And it was interesting working with she's a wonderful, don't get me wrong, wonderful choreographer, but I was her assistant at the time. And there were many times when I had to say to her, look, this is Duke Ellington's music. This is what it means. This is what we can actually do. So it allowed me also to realize that, oh, okay, I'm not only just a performing artist, I can create too. And I'd always created. So if I go back to where I started, what I thought was being a creator was when I was 7. Okay. So all the time of my life, I've been going, okay, this is what I want to do. So jazz has always been there. I think it's that freedom of expression that's allowed me to jump from one thing to another, but always come back home to what I believe is jazz for me, which being able to express myself as an individual first and foremost, but also know the history, know where it's coming from, try to understand where it's going, and be part of that journey of people who were still trying to keep and preserve that art form.
Right. So
I've jumped a lot, Bob. I'm jumping all over the place.
Do you feel that your inner push to develop and create maybe came from that idea? You're saying that what you felt and what you knew at a very early age was not represented in the culture and in what the dance world was like. And since it wasn't there in sophisticated ladies, and you just said, all right, this is what I see it as,
very much so.
I'm going to get my foothold and make that
absolutely happen. Very much so. I'm not saying that there was nobody else doing it, but jazz has had this. I often think here, particularly in England and in Europe, jazz sometimes is just seen as the word, and actually what isn't recognized is what's the foundation of it. The foundation for me is what's most important in jazz. The foundation of the fact that it comes from a people, and those people need to be recognized for who they are and what they've provided. It is an American vernacular, of course, and no one can take that away. But the way it has moved and migrated, I have, and I still kind of feel that it's lost its core meaning. And for me, musical theatre is great, show dance is great, even competition dance is great, but actually we've lost the nugget and that truth behind the word jazz. We see the word jazz, but we don't know what it is. And in many ways, I think when I did Sophisticated Ladies, I had done enough of a career. By this point, I was 28. And I felt from the age of 16 to 28, having worked through the West End, having traveled around the world, having done TV, having done musical theatre, concert dance, cabaret. I kind of did it all very, very early. And by the time I'd got to 28, it was like, I need to do something that's going to work for me. And that's going to fulfill me, that's going to feed me creatively, artistically, emotionally, spiritually, even. All of those things became the force and the push. But more importantly, what I really wanted to see was jazz have its platform as an art form, and not just not just in musical theatre, or not just as a commodity of commercial work, I guess.
Okay. And when you made this decision, were there resources for you? Did you have dancers available to you who are interested in that? Was there a framework of anybody who would support you in moving in this direction?
What I did before, I'd worked with so many people. I'd worked with Bill Luther and within his company. So I was learning all the time. Bill Luther was also an American choreographer and dancer. He was with Alvin Ailey. He lived in England. So I kind of always managed somehow to gravitate to the Americans. Somehow I was always able to do that, and they would gravitate to me. And that's probably why when I come to New York and I come to America, I feel so familiar and it feels normal for me. I'm never feeling out of set. And also all my friends in America kind of accept me as one of them. And that's a beautiful thing. So I think that has always happened. Yeah, I just think when I look at that time and I think of who was around at that time, there were many dancers that I worked with who were also looking for that outlet to be
Mm-hmm.
artistically engaged with the jazz art form.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I had 6 dancers right at the very, very beginning. I had 2
Good.
gentlemen and 4 female dancers and myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how BOP started. BOP started on a women of prayer, to be quite honest. But
Mm-hmm.
it was a women of prayer that I'd had since the age of 17.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd been bubbling over. It just needed me. I never felt that I could start a company or have a company or engage with anyone until I knew my craft. And the only way I knew my craft was that the fact that I'd worked steadily within
Mm-hmm.
all areas of the industry to be able
Mm-hmm.
to understand the craft of engaging people, the craft of putting on a show, the craft of production
Mm-hmm.
values, even, the craft of musical, what do I want musically,
Mm-hmm.
to frame a show, to create something from beginning till the end.
Mm-hmm.
That was always very important to me. And I
Right.
call it my creative cake.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a creative cake, and within that cake there's 8 slices, and I have to
Mm-hmm.
fill those 8 slices with
There you
all that
go.
I need to then be able
Mm-hmm.
to take that forward. And luckily I had dancers who I'd worked with, and I wouldn't call them dancers, they were performers, they were performing artists. So they in themselves were great at what they did. They all sang,
Mm-hmm.
they all danced, they'd had life experience as well. And so it was easy to communicate with them and say, okay, guys,
Mm-hmm.
this is the plan. This is what
Right.
I want to do. So in 1996 is when I formed the company. I founded the company. I set it up legally, made it a limited organization, and off I went, off and running,
So
and
you had an established philosophy that you wanted right from the start. This
I
is
kind
how,
of did. And
yeah.
I think, as I say, with all the years of performing and all the years of watching and learning and taking on just being a sponge, I kind of knew what I needed to do. I also had, prior to starting BOP in 1996, for the 2 years prior to that, I was also co-artistic director of the jazz theatre. Well, it wasn't a jazz theatre company, it was a jazz dance company called Jazz Exchange under Sharon
Mhm.
Ray.
Sure.
And
Mhm.
and I co-artistic directed that, and that also gave me an understanding of how to run a company, working in
Mhm.
the office, so I could see how it was all done, dealing with funders,
Mhm.
dealing with potential sponsors, putting on showcases. So it was everything that I did, I think, just brought itself to me developing BOP and
Mhm.
founding BOP and saying, okay, this is my moment, this is my choice now,
Right.
to do something that I've always really wanted to do,
Mhm.
which is put
Okay.
jazz on the map, to be quite
Right. All
honest.
right. So you mentioned BOP, and I know that stands for a body of people, but why
People,
don't you
yeah.
talk a little bit more about that? And what I'm going to do is pull in a little slideshow
Oh,
of some
okay. Oh,
things, and so you can talk over that.
well, I can know. Well, there's
Sounds
my
good.
husband. That's my husband, my co-artistic director, and my husband, Paul Jenkins, who, without actually, when I started the company in 1996, it was myself. And then in 1999, I met Paul, and
Mhm.
he had his own music production company in North London. And we happened to work on a musical, actually. We were both working on a musical, he being the arranger and composer, myself, the director and choreographer. And that's how we met. And within a split second, I found my soulmate, but I'd also found
Mhm.
my creative partner, because for me, bringing the music and the dance and actually bringing live music
Mhm.
to what I was trying to do just became the perfect marriage. It was the perfect marriage. It was also what I'd intended BOP to uh,
Mhm.
found and put a platform there to bring the dance and the music together so that people could understand, actually, this is jazz dance because it actually does go with its jazz music.
Mhm.
I've never quite understood. We have jazz music and we have jazz dance, but often they're separated.
Right.
And for me, bringing those 2 elements, which are the core elements of the jazz idiom and the jazz vernacular and the jazz vocabulary, it 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 seemed the honest thing to do, is to have live music and jazz dance. What's
Mhm.
wonderful about the fact in in Body of People, or BOP as we call it, is that we have live music for some shows, but also we have beautiful composed music, original composed music by Paul, because he's a jazz trumpeter, he's an arranger, he's a composer, he's a music producer. So I kind of struck lucky. I kind of got lucky when I met Paul. And through these years, the three of us have just kind of kept the wheels running and kept the fuel in the tank and kept it going. Sometimes difficult financially, but actually all our work, whether I be teaching or whether Paul is teaching or lecturing, because he teaches music and lectures music technology, it all goes back into the company. So that is our baby now. You know, our baby for the last 20 years has been BOP. And actually all our creative endeavors go through BOP, you know, from our philosophy to the education of BOP, you know, what we share with dancers, what we mentor out, our residents, we just filter through BOP, to be quite honest. We are BOP.
Well, I think it's almost like it's such an ideal situation to have the jazz music and the jazz dance together, you know, in the same location. You know, we were talking a little bit before about teaching in academia, and there's so many barriers between groups.
Absolutely.
And I know that jazz dance will be put in the dance department, so you're along with ballet and modern dance, which has a pretty much different aesthetic on many things. And I have always thought that, why don't they put the jazz dancers and the jazz musicians together in their own department, so that they would be together? Because I know they're music and dance, but still it's a more common expression that they share. And so you maybe have that right now.
But how wonderful that would be. I mean, I have suggested this to many musical theatre colleges and performing arts colleges here in the UK. Not something that's taken with much thought or understanding as to why, probably because it's a financial thing. But, you know, for me, I just can't see the two marry so wonderfully together, out of which you will get new composers writing compositions for dance and theatre, and not just for their gigs and their recording labels and their record deals. So that would be one way. It would also allow dancers to orally understand jazz music, not just from the CD play or Spotify, but to be in that organic situation with musicians, which is what we thankfully are able to do with our dancers, is to engage them with what it means to be orally engaged with jazz music, all those wonderful rhythms, you know, different styles, that complex rhythms, you know, all of those things. And I think actually that's fundamentally where jazz, I think, has broken down in its education, is that we have separated it. And because there is the separation between the music and the dance, I think this is why jazz dance itself has lost its way, because it's not connected to its inherent partner. So we're teaching in isolation. Actually, jazz is taught in isolation in many senses. And actually, we have many more teachers now who are not of our age, Bob, who haven't had our lifetime of knowledge and experience of doing what we do. And you get a lot of teachers now that are young, but they have no understanding of what the jazz history is. So, and their music choice is not coming from the jazz expression. It's generally pop music. So this is what I'm saying, along the way, if we're not careful, we'll lose a beautiful art form, because it's been so dispersed and configured into something that actually isn't what it was, isn't what it could be. We're kind of there at the moment. That's my personal opinion.
Well, then how do you approach choreography in terms of keeping it tight with the jazz tradition? Are there certain elements that you're trying to instill in it, or is it just something, well, it just comes from your, you know, from your personality and your feeling of who you are, and it's just a natural flow? But what are the things that make it jazz?
I think for me, what makes it jazz for me is that natural, innate expression, to express yourself through movement to music, and then on top of that, express the kinetics, the aesthetic within the style of jazz. I know many people have looked at my work and said, oh, it's very Ailey, or it's very this, or it's very Martha Graham. But actually my work is so broad and my style is so broad, because I actually do take all the influences that I have been lucky enough to dance within. And that has been ballet, that has been contemporary, that has been musical theatre, that has been, you know, concert dance. I've kind of brought all of that together. But on top of that, I try to find a narrative behind what I do. So I might take, for example, at this present moment, we're working, Paul is writing some phenomenal music, and we're taking the poetry of Maya Angelou, which has been done. Many people have done this, but we're taking it on a new journey, and we've broken it down and we've looked at the words, and it's a very narrative piece, and it's very personal. And it's personal to each of the dancers because, you know, I've given each of the dancers a choice. You choose a word out of what Maya has said, and let's develop that comes from you. What's your story to that? And if they can't find it, I help them find it. And we sit and we discuss, we sit and we talk, and there's a process. So that's the narrative side. That's what I call artistic jazz. And then on another expression, I might do something to Gregory Porter. Recently, we just did a piece on Gregory Porter, Liquid Spirit, which is full on swing jazz, but done with a modern twist. Then I might do something that is completely, you know, like, for example, Paul and I, we work together on stage, but we love to improvise. So Paul will have a standard piece of music that he's written, that we've understood, we've worked together. He will come on and he will play improvised over the top of that music. I will come on and I will dance. So we stagger so much. And yet the point for me is that it's the music and the dance have to relate. If they don't relate and there's no connection between that, then I really can't see where the jazz is, because I'm relating to what I hear.
Right.
Paul relates to what he sees. The dancers relate to me. I relate to them. So it becomes a community. It's a community. It's a we call it the BOP family.
Sure.
You know, because we are that close now that for example, in rehearsals the other day, trying to come up with this idea, and I could not find the words. And one of my dancers just spilled the words out. And I said, "Are you in my head?" She went, "Absolutely, Dolly." So that's when it's become so organic and it becomes so real and it becomes so tangible. I don't know that there's another art form that allows you to do that somehow. Maybe I'm just biased because I love jazz so much. But I think that the beauty of jazz is that it is that open. It is that open. It is that open for us to find ourselves, express ourselves, show the art form as it can be shown. Because we are not seeing it as artistic. We're seeing it as show dance. We're seeing it as competition dance. We're seeing it in musical theatre. And I have to say, even now, if we look at new musical theatre productions, very few of them resemble anything that's jazz dance.
Absolutely.
So where is jazz? So if we're, you know, for me, having a theatre company, and I call it Jazz Theatre Company because it's not just a dance company, because we do more than that. You know, if I can look at a contemporary company and look at what they do and say, well, is that contemporary? The same can be said of what I'm doing. Is that jazz? Well, it is jazz because I'm using jazz music, because I innately understand where I'm coming from with it. I've taken the history and I'm bringing it through. I'm not disregarding it. I'm bringing the history of jazz and all that it has, and I'm trying to not step on the shoulders of anybody that's gone before, but try and preserve what the past heroes of our art form have given us to be able to walk through and continue to show. You know, now some people might recognize jazz as only as far back as Bob Fosse. I have a problem with that, because that means you're not being educated well enough if you're performing art, or you haven't studied enough about jazz to understand it goes a little further back. Than that, a lot further back. And so for me, I'm always trying to go right back, because I know that's where I can truly connect with the jazz art form and the jazz expression.
Right. Now, I know that you choreographed a great deal to Miles Davis. You have a love affair with Miles Davis.
I do.
So,
it's sad to say, it's upsetting for my husband to hear that, but I do. I really do.
Is there
very, 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 very close second? Which one you'll have to work out.
Okay. Is there something particular in his music as opposed to other that you feel and that you then transmit into your choreography?
When I think about Miles, I remember when I first heard Miles, again, something that my father threw at me on a Sunday afternoon when we were listening to music. And I think the album Kind of Blue has stayed with me ever since. And it was kind of a dream of mine to actually at some point be able to dance to this incredible music that actually speaks. Every single instrument speaks. Miles speaks. He actually has a conversation with every track that is on that album and more of his work. And it happened a year before I started the company, which was the trigger actually for me to go, it's time, I can do this, start a company. In 1995, I was commissioned by the Arts Council to present a piece of work at the South Bank Centre. And they gave me a choice. They said, anything you want, anything you want. Okay, fine, here it comes. This was my opportunity to take Miles and put him on stage with dance, with a live band. And that's what I did. And I did 6 pieces. I had 6 dancers. I had 6 musicians, and that was it. And Touches of Miles was born in 1995. Now, Touches of Miles has been our inaugural piece within the company since then. And it's kind of like our Alvin Ailey moment. You know, Alvin has revelations. We have Touches of Miles. And Touches of Miles literally touches on all Miles's seminal music. And within that, I tried to find the hues of the colors of blue. The costumes were in blue. I tried to take different elements so that I can show the lyrical side of jazz. We've got Tutu that shows another edge of jazz. We've got All Blues, which is just lyrical and ponches. And it really is a wonderful, wonderful piece. And as the years have gone on, it has grown and it has grown and it's grown. Now we have Miles talking. Now we have pictures of Miles. So it's not just the dance that you see or the live music that you listen to. There's Miles. Miles is part of the whole scenery when we're on stage. So yeah, it's a very special piece, and it's probably the one. It's the one piece of choreography, all of the sections within it, and it has grown from 6 pieces to much, much more. It started as a 30-minute piece. Now it's a whole act. So you know, I'm quite proud of that. Quite proud of that over the years. And it's a choreography that I've never, ever forgotten. I never have to look at a video to remember it. And funny, I can do, like yesterday I was teaching, I couldn't tell you what I was doing yesterday, but I can remember this because it is so precious to me and means so much to me. And Miles means so much. And actually that was the springboard to then go, okay, what other jazz musicians should I honor? So then we went to Dizzy Gillespie, and we took Dizzy Gillespie's music, and we created a piece. Well, it's not a piece; it's a theatre production called Dizzy Heights, and that took all Dizzy Gillespie's music, and I set that in a club, and it was all individual. So that was a very narrative, almost dance musical style. I had a singer in it. Again, we had the live band. The dancers had characters. So that was another. And then that said to me, okay, who else can we do? And then we went to Duke Ellington. Okay. And then we have a piece called Duke's Place, which we performed. And that is with an actor playing Duke Ellington, who's talking about his story of his life. And all the songs fit into his story and his little tales and dance. And that has a 10-piece jazz band, 12 dancers. So as we've moved along, we've got bigger and bigger and bigger, less and less money, but we're still managing to put these things on. Because
one way or another.
The sad thing about jazz, specifically in England, is it's not recognized as an art form. And I have to just say that, as honest as that, it is not recognized as an art form. And although BOP has a reputation of being here and existing for all this time, and I have a reputation of long-standing, having done everything, we're still not deemed to be seen as artistic. So we have this dichotomy in this situation where, it's a real knock hard on the door and trying to break a glass ceiling that we still believe there's a chance that we can break it. and
Mm-hmm.
allowed jazz to be on the same platform as classical dance, contemporary dance, and now hip hop dance.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those latter, the three latter, it's the platforms are there, the theaters are there, the producers are there, the funding is there, the support is there. But if you say jazz, they go, what's jazz? And
Well,
they
I think
see
that
it, as I dare to say, like jazz
right.
hands, show dance, very commercial, TV dance. They don't really quite accept this fact that it is an art. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if that is because they don't want to understand where it came from, or they know where it came from and they don't want to give that any credence or platform,
Mm-hmm.
or they just don't want to accept that jazz could be
Mm-hmm.
artistic.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I suppose mine and Paul and through BOP, our job here at this time, and has been for the last 20 odd years, is to say jazz does exist. It is an art form. It is credible.
Mm-hmm.
It is an amazing, it has fed every other art form. If we think about it, from the music to the dance, it has fed into everything else. We can
Right.
have a jazz ballet from a ballet company, but we can't have a jazz ballet from a jazz company.
I know that.
So you
know.
see that,
I know
but
that. Yeah.
it hasn't deterred us. Sometimes we get frustrated, and that's only normal. And the frustration is not from ourselves. The frustration is, oh, can I get through that door? Can I actually speak to somebody? We've now written a book. We've now got, I'm going to show it to you, a book.
Yeah.
The Essential Guide to Jazz Dance. Why? 3 years ago, a publisher came to us and said there are no jazz books in England. And we've looked and we've not found any other jazz company or jazz people that we could go to. And we came across you, and then other people said you need to speak to Dollie and Paul. They have a jazz theatre company. They're the only ones in the UK who have a jazz, a bona fide jazz theatre company. The publishers came and we spoke to them, and they said, yeah, we'd like you to write a book on jazz dance. We went, okay. And then afterwards I went, ooh, that's a big ask. Although it was something if I'm honest, I've always wanted to write one or write something, that would support jazz. But here it was, we were being asked, we were being published, and okay. So it took 3 years, because in between we've got to work.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
it arrived, and it's now published, and it's out. It came out in October, the end of October, the 1st of November. By all accounts, it's selling really well. And what it does and what it offers is an opportunity for people who are into jazz dance but don't understand where it's from to read. And actually, it is a guide. It isn't a tome. It isn't the Bible. I've done my research like you do your research. I've done my research. It's also known knowledge. It's also innately known knowledge, but it's also experienced knowledge. It's all of those things in a book, just explaining where jazz came from, its journey, modern jazz, the confusion that happened somewhere in there. It's all in the book. My philosophy and definition behind jazz exercise, because I think we need to move on from the days of, dare I say, Matt Maddox and Luigi, who are no longer with us, and jazz has moved on. So I'm kind of hoping, oh, we've got somebody speaking to us. It's I totally. Hi, Kathleen. Hi. Yes, it is outrageous that jazz doesn't get recognised, but that's what we're here for. That's why we're having this conversation together. This is why we are talking. This is why I'm so passionate about it. And I guess I'm not alone with that. I know I'm not alone with that feeling. It's just frustrating when you see something that has been around for so long, that has, dare I say, that possibility of just disappearing. And I, for one, whilst I'm alive and able to kick a leg and throw that art out there, I'm kind of one of those people who are not going to allow that to happen, because it is a special art form, and it is an art
Absolutely.
form.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that in jazz too, because it has so many facets, and some of them do come from that commercial theater. And it just creates a perception in people's minds. Because I know many times in my past, if I say, oh, I do jazz dance, the first word they say is Bob Fosse.
Of course.
And they're like jazz hands. and
Absolutely.
like, so
And I
that's
say
what
it as a
they
joke.
think. And the way you're interpreting jazz and using jazz as a creative form
Mm,
is not from that aspect at all, but
not at
that's
all.
something that they know about. So, they don't look at jazz to say, oh, there's another aspect of jazz. I'm curious about it. Let me look at that also. It's very
Well, I
easy
think
just
that's
to,
what the book, sorry, Bob, I think
yeah.
that's what I've tried to do with the book,
Hmm.
because what we found here in England, although we have every single performing arts college in this country
Hmm.
teaching jazz on their curriculum, in their degree programs, my question is, where then does it go? If we are spending all this money on education to educate our
Hmm.
potential performers of the
Hmm.
future, one, they don't have anywhere to go. They can go to the commercial world and they can possibly get a musical, possibly have a career in the commercial world. But there are those dancers who have spent all that money and are good enough, trained well enough, are dedicated enough to
Hmm.
pursue something further. And my
Hmm.
concern is that we are teaching all these students, but where do they go? And then they get disaffected, and then they possibly teach with very little understanding of what's really going on. And, for me, it's kind of leaving a legacy. We need to leave a legacy where students and dancers actually really understand and really can speak, because I often ask students in a class, name me a jazz musician.
Exactly.
No idea.
Yeah.
No, 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 no,
Yeah.
no. They haven't any idea. Name me, apart from Bob Fosse, a jazz
Hmm.
choreographer.
Hmm.
If you
Yeah.
mention Pearl Primus, if you mention Catherine Dunham,
Hmm.
maybe Alvin
Yeah.
Ailey, yes. But then
Yeah.
Alvin Ailey is, after all, contemporary.
Yeah, on that ground level, there's definitely a lack of understanding of the
Very much
heritage,
so.
or even a curiosity to know
To know.
what became the year 2000. They'll just stick with what's on the television shows on So You
Absolutely.
Think You Can Dance, and to not go that much more deeply than that. But I understand that completely. As part of my jazz dance classes, I will be giving assignments to say, here are 7 seminal jazz dance musicians
Mm-hmm.
and composers, and you need to know at least their basic, most well-known pieces. Not that you're going to know everything
Every
about Miles
single,
Davis or,
absolutely
or
not. But
somebody, but just
have
to
a
inform
nuance of
yourself.
understanding or knowledge. And I think,
Hmm.
some people say I'm tough. I'm not tough as a teacher. I'm not tough as a teacher. What I am is
Hmm.
passionate. I
Hmm.
think sometimes passion, I do. Oh, there you go. Thank you, Kathleen. I am passionate about what I do, and I teaching for me is just an extension of being a choreographer.
Hmm.
It's an extension of who I am. The beautiful thing about what we all do, and I hope that this refers to everybody, is we are extending ourselves. I can only say what I do is me. It's not
Hmm.
separate from me. And so when I teach, I'm teaching from my soul, because
Hmm.
I want somebody to get it and I want somebody to be the best. You can't teach everyone, and everyone doesn't want to be taught. But those that are there and their ears are open, I
Hmm.
manage to grab them, and I do get them. I bring them into BOP. We mentor so many dancers. So many dancers have come through BOP. They may never perform with us, but that's not the point. I want them to understand a
Hmm.
different way of understanding and training and getting their technique and getting their experience and their expression through jazz. So that's what we
Hmm.
do. I don't ask them for any money. That's not what it's about. Come, pay me by getting it together and
Hmm.
go out, and then go out and be amazing.
Right.
So,
Okay.
it's more about that, mentoring, giving opportunity. And, I don't think there are many teachers that are here that give those type of opportunities and don't expect anything. I expect no money. My
Hmm.
payment is that you be amazing at what you do, because
Hmm.
it's you.
Great.
There is
Yeah.
no fairy godmother that's going to make you
Yeah.
amazing. You have to find it for yourself. And if you can't find it through jazz, I know where you're going to find that, because, jazz is the one place where you can be
Hmm.
yourself.
Sure.
You're not stuck
Hmm.
to a bun. There's no pink tights.
Hmm.
You don't have to wear a pair of socks. You can put some shoes on from time to time.
Hmm.
It's a beautiful, beautiful art form. And I think, what I'm finding now is people are really drawn to it. And it's not just the professional dancers, it is also the dance enthusiasts. I probably have more of those in my open class than I have pros, because there's something that is engaging for them. There's something feel good factor. There's something where they don't feel that they have to be a certain way. They can still be themselves. And I think that's the bit in jazz.
Okay, so you've been at this for over 20 years with your company.
Yeah.
And as you're saying, there's that sort of disconnect that's happening with the heritage as it relates to younger people and what their dance experience is. So I know that even part of your company, not only with choreography or performance, you're working on some things for outreach, for education in jazz dance. So it's not only I need to put on a performance to reach people in a certain way, I need to talk to them at a different level. So what are you doing in terms of that?
Well, that continues to, that's part of the philosophy behind BOP, and part of it, again, it goes hand in hand, like you say. There is the performance side, but there's always the educational side. You know, obviously I guest a lot in Europe. I'm honored and humbled to be invited many, many times out to Europe, to many destinations. As I say, I'm out to Portugal on Wednesday for 4 days of jazz workshops. And you know, you go to the different countries and there is an understanding that jazz is artistic. This is what's so beautiful. In Europe, they may not have it as their first style of dance or their first form of dance, because they're often classically trained or contemporary. So, you know, my job is to go in there and just burst the bubble and say, okay, this is what jazz is, because what they've only seen is what they've seen on YouTube or video. And they don't get an understanding of what it is to actually practice that. So I'm very lucky that I can go and I'm invited as a guest to go and teach in these wonderful performing arts colleges and schools and, you know, events that talk about jazz, that share it, that have other teachers coming to me, and I work with the teachers so that they can go off and they can share it. So I'm kind of keeping, hopefully, the cycle going. And hopefully, you know, inspiring others to just look at jazz in a different way. As I said, it's not just a word. It's kind of much deeper than that. And I really, you know, the outreach that we do and the connecting with the young people, connecting with, students, connecting with professionals, you know, it's across the board, you know. Oh, there we go. This is BOP doing Liquid Spirit, actually. This is Liquid Spirit. You know, again, this is what I call, it's a concert dance piece, but it's a short, you know, 3.5 minute piece that is, you know, woof in your face with 9 dancers there. Yeah. And it's, you know, my style changes. It depends what the project is. It depends where we're going. It depends what we're asked to do. Depends what the commission is. You know, next year I'm working with EBB, which is a contemporary company out in Madrid. I did some development work with them last year. And again, the piece for them will be completely different to somebody else's piece that I'm going to create. And I think that's what's so exciting about jazz, that you can spread your wings and you can go to different places and you can work with other forms of dance and still bring that jazz element without losing it. And I think because I'm classically trained and because I have a technique and because it's important that, you know, jazz isn't just seen as, you know, social dance. I think that's the word I'm trying to say. Yes, it has social, we know it comes from social dance, but it isn't just social dance. And I think that's the perception that people have, that jazz is often seen as just social dance, and it's not. So it's lovely when, you know, I get an opportunity to work in an artistic way with artistic companies, because they then recognize also, she's artistic.
Yeah. And you were mentioning, you know, earlier you're talking about your roots and the feeling that you have. It's a feeling that you're
It's
bringing forth.
Feeling.
And when you are working with people in different cultures, that feeling may not be native to their culture, or so maybe that's why they're seeing jazz dance in a certain way, because there's not that much of a, you know, identification factor. And so, you know, in terms of you working with other groups to get them to understand feeling of it, in addition to movement style and movement technique. I mean,
and I think
that's
sorry, Bob, I didn't mean to cut
No,
you
go
off. I
ahead.
think that's the message that always comes back to me, and I think that's why I get invited so many, and from being invited to one place, it trips me off to somewhere else, and somebody else hears about me, and we've got to get Dollie in, and I think it is that the key comments that come back to me in Europe is that we feel it, Dollie. We feel what you feel. We feel the connection to the music. We have never danced like this before because it's always been ballet or contemporary. And also, you have to look at the history of Europe. Actually, Europe artistically is high. They have a high level of art. So they understand an artist and they understand art when it is presented in the correct way. Might be alien to them, but they do understand it and they appreciate it and they respect it, which is kind of when I come back home, it's kind of, it's like I have to scratch my head and zip up a little bit just because it's not quite the same. It's not quite the same. It really isn't. So hence a lot of my work is outside England, although a lot of my work is here. So I feel very blessed because I kind of call myself international, which is a lovely way to see what I do. And it isn't work. It isn't work at all. For me to get up every morning and do what I have always wanted to do every day of my life, that's not work. That's just something, that's a joy. That's an honor.
Right.
It's a real honor.
Yeah, and that's something that I've noticed too through my teachings throughout Europe, particularly in Finland and in Russia. They are looking at jazz dance as, well, that's America's folk dance. And since they have such a strong folk dance tradition on their own, that gives it a veracity. That gives it.
And I think that's exactly it, Bob. Yeah. I think that's beautiful. I hadn't really thought about it with that word, but I actually think you're absolutely right. The fact that Europe has its own folk dance. And you've hit the nail right. That's fabulous. Whoa. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. That's what it is. That's the connection. They understand it because it's folk dance. American folk dance. They all have their folk dance. There's also that trip that a lot of Europe went to America. So there is that already connection. There's that beautiful connection already with all that, coming together and fusion of all those different styles of folk dance. And this is where the UK falls, because we don't really have a folk dance, do we? We have Morris dancing. And I wouldn't really call that inspiring for the soul and taking us somewhere out. Yeah. So when we look at it from that point of view, that's probably why jazz isn't connected in the same way as it is with ballet and contemporary and now hip hop, because hip hop, God love them. And I love hip hop. I can't do it. I love it. But, I see a lot of dancers here doing hip hop, and you ask them, I'm talking to them all the time, and I ask them, where's it coming from? Where do you know? They don't know. So it's an appropriation of another art form that once again has just become popularized and commercialized. And I'm not saying that the everyday person shouldn't be able to dance. But there has to be a kind of line here.
Yeah. There's a liberation in the form coming from the African root, and that is something that I think those other cultures recognize, because maybe they didn't quite have that in their culture, and they said, I could never feel that open and liberated and free as what jazz is giving me, and that was something that was very attractive.
I think I agree totally with that. And yeah, like I said, most of the comments that I get back from directors of the Performing Arts College, all my students absolutely adored you. They felt so free. You were very open and passionate. But it's the fact that they dance. They really feel like they're dancing. Now, that might be just me as an individual going like yourself and doing what I do. But obviously, it's something that works. And it's something that touches these individuals, and it's something that allows them to feel alive. And I think that's what jazz does. Makes you feel alive.
Yeah. So, Dollie, what's up for the future with your company? I mean, are you mostly working with the company, or do you have other outside projects?
As I say, we've got performances coming up. We get back in January, and it's full force into rehearsals. We have performances coming up in February. Then I have to go away in March. I'm away. I'm in Chicago in March, and then I'm in
Where are you in
Spain.
Chicago?
I'm doing the Dance World Cup. I'm head judge with Dance World Cup, which is an international. I talk about competitions, but I love them. As you know, I told you I started from competitions, and I am head judge with Dance World Cup, which is an international competition that goes all around the world. And every year we have the finals in a different destination in the world. And I'm going to judge at the qualifiers of the Chicago end of Dance World Cup. So I'm coming out to Chicago in March. Then I'm in Spain for most of the rest of March and April, working with EBB and doing another Jazz Barcelona festival. And then with that, I could go on and I could go on and I could go on. And my next holiday is August. That's what I know.
What about some shows in the West End? What about some
that
more
would be nice, wouldn't it? But that costs bondoodlies. That cost a lot of money, and
but nobody's reaching out to you to
not in
choreograph
that
their new
way.
musical.
No. You have to understand the West End is a very close shop here. No different than anywhere else like Broadway. You know, and what's sad, you know, it's very interesting. In the early days when we started the company, there were small what we called your off Broadway. We had our off West End, and they were fabulous little theaters run by independent producers and directors who just wanted wonderful work to come into their theaters. They have gone. So we are not able to play with the big players because they're not looking for money for productions that are going to lose the money. They need to fill those seats and they need to make an awful lot of money. So it's easier to put on another musical or another musical or another musical or another musical that we have seen many times before, but it's back again. Rather than giving, you know, the great hope of the country of artists the opportunity to have one space where we could go in, pay very little money, do a kind of split thing, you know, let us in, we'll fill it. You know, we're not trying to make lots of money, we're trying to share our art. That would be really nice. If I won the lottery, first thing I will buy is a theatre. First thing I'll buy is a theatre and a screen.
All right. Well, you're obviously an extremely passionate person, Dollie, and passionate about jazz dance, and it is who you are. It's, you know, it's your personality and your representation. So that's what the form needs. I've, you know, always mentioned this to other people. We had our, you know, those big quote founding fathers in the Luigi and Maddox and Giordano and people like that. And after that, there wasn't a lot of visibility given to the next wave who were doing things, and those are the people who need a lot of visibility because you know they are taking it to the next step, and that intermediate group of people are very important. So you're certainly one of those people in the UK and throughout Europe and into the States. And you know, I think that you should be invited. You know, there are some jazz academic conferences that go on here through the National Dance Educators Organization. Like every 3 years they've had it, and they should be they should be reaching out to you, and you should be coming and being a part of it with your presentation.
I would love that. I would really love that. I mean, one of our plans and one of our hopes, future, this one takes some money. We're trying to do a jazz convention here. It's been, we've been talking about it. We've tried to, you know, line, and we have to find the right people to do it with. So that is something, because we don't have that in England or in Europe. So I know, you know, Gus's Giordano's got theirs, and then there are other things, and we just need to get the one in Europe, and then we can all link up, and then it'll all be good. You know, no, it would all be good. That's like the book. That's the next plan, the big jazz convention. Then we invite you, Bob, to come and talk.
Oh, thank you.
And give some workshops.
I'll pack my bags. So where can people get your book? I will make sure I put it in the description.
They can get the book from Amazon, but it's also with our. I'll send the link. I don't know. Anyway, it's on Amazon. And it's next door to Stern's book, actually. It comes up when it pops up. It pops up next to the Stern's book. So we're quite proud of that. And you can also order it from our publishers, which is at Crowwood Press. And it's based in UK. It's a small distribution, small publishers, but they write books like this and they publish books like this.
Well, I will look it up on Amazon at least and get that in the description. So if
Thank
people are
you.
watching this, they'll be able to at least see where the book is available.
It's a
But
good buy, guys. It's a
yeah.
good coffee table, and it's a
Hmm.
good shelf. And what's been lovely is many of the schools here have bought it, and many of the
Hmm.
performing arts colleges have bought it, and
Hmm.
obviously many dancers and dancing teachers. And so much feedback, and great feedback has been that it's great for keynotes. It's helpful music, because not only is it about the dance, what we thought we do is stick the music in, because people don't
Hmm.
know about the music, and dancers don't think about the music and how they should, the music that they could listen to choreograph,
Hmm.
teachers different music to teach to and use for your soundtrack for your warm-ups, because a lot of people are still not doing the warm-ups. So it's there's a lot of information there, and it is a guide, but it's a guide that opens it up for people to go, I didn't know that, let me go and check that out.
Hmm.
Because this, as I say, it's not a Bible, but it is a guide, and
Right.
it's the perfect guide, even if I say so myself.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, thank you, Dolly, for spending
Oh,
time with
Bob,
us
it's been a
tonight through your
pleasure.
busy schedule, and it's glad to finally hook up with you, you
And
know,
you
and,
too.
and talk in person.
It's
So,
lovely, lovely, lovely,
we can
lovely.
stay in contact, and what I'm going to plan on doing in the future as I get a few more of these broadcasts under my belt is to bring in multiple people so we can actually have
That would
discussions
be
between
lovely.
3 or 4 people to talk about a specific aspect of jazz dance.
Get me
So
on with Melanie.
yeah, and we can definitely have you and both of you, and there'd be a great broadcast. Okay.
Oh, that's so sweet of
Uh,
you, Bob.
All
Thank
right.
you
Well,
so,
thank you.
so
My
much.
best
And
to
actually, it's
you.
lovely that you've given me this time. It stopped me
Yeah.
from running around. So I'm very happy for that. I should
Okay.
go and have a
All
cup of
right.
tea now.
All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull you off of this stream, and I'm just going
Okay.
to give a few things to wrap this up, and then we'll talk for a second.
Merry Christmas to you all over
Okay.
there in New York, from London, and love to you, Bob, and take
There you
care.
go.
We'll
Thank you,
speak
Don.
really soon. Thank you for
Okay.
having me.
Sure. Okay, so that was Dollie Henry, and with the BOP, or Body of People Jazz Theatre Company in the UK, in London. And she's obviously somebody who's very passionate about jazz dance and about what it means to her, what she can bring to other people in many different areas, not just in one. And now she's writing books. I know there's also a previous DVD, a jazz dance exercise class. The music is available from that, from her husband, Paul Jenkins. So that would be a great thing to look into too. If you like what you saw today, please subscribe to this channel. It's going very well. In fact, we just broke 2,000 subscribers yesterday, and that's like a 175% increase in just the last 9 months. So that's really wonderful. So click the notifications bell so that you'll always be notified when we're doing a new video. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate your time, and we'll be seeing you in the next video.